Hello, and welcome to the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. Each episode, we talk about a particular topic in the life of a professor. We are tenure-track faculty members in the sciences, working at a primarily undergraduate university in California. The purpose of our podcast is reflection, so we bring something we think is working and something we're working on to discuss.
Welcome to the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. I'm Ruth.
And I'm Claire. And today we're talking about academic honesty. But first, Ruth, how was your week?
My week was pretty good. We're, again, kind of like getting into a bit more of a groove with the kids' schoolwork and a lot less tears from everybody involved. So that's
good.
Yeah, that's definitely a good thing. And so, yeah, I wonder, as we come up to a period of time where we're going to have some breaks, like, is there going to be a big reset or have we laid the groundwork? I guess I kind of wonder this too about us coming back next semester online. Will it be as traumatic or moderately less? So I don't know.
I like to think we've laid some groundwork.
You're always the positive ones. You're like, yeah.
Oh,
even
man.
the fact that like you, because I was going to call this episode Academic Dishonesty, so I like that you're like,
well,
you're focusing on the good side.
Also a good name.
Yeah. So tell me about your week.
My week was good. So one of the things that's groundwork from this semester was this is the first semester I've been really loose with my late policy. And, so it's been like, okay, we're in a pandemic. There's deadlines. You should stick to the deadlines because that's how you're going to stay on track with the class. But it's really loose. And if you need to hand something in late, just shoot me an email and I'll change the due date on Canvas and you'll submit it late. And, I was kind of worried about that because normally I have a really strict late policy to help encourage people to stay up with the class and not work on old stuff when they should be making sure they understand the current stuff. But anyway, I've been pleasantly surprised with how, it hasn't all exploded. And, I have a few people who were behind for a few weeks and are still behind but are working on the old stuff. And we've kind of come up with a system where my recommendation is, keep up with the current assignments, and then as you have time, go back and do the ones you missed.
Which is really important, right? Because sometimes people just get so far down that hole. Yeah,
it's really easy to miss all the current stuff if you're not present for that. So anyway, I do think, I'm planning to go back to my strict schedule once we're back in a, face-to-face kind of setting, because I do think there's a lot of benefits, and I kind of wonder if my reputation of being really strict with deadlines is allowing it to be okay.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe I'm assuming my reputation precedes me, but anyway, it has not blown up as much as I thought it would by having loose deadlines. So that's been really, really nice.
Well, I think the piece of information of always saying yes, but you do need to get caught back up is
right.
But one thing that kind of makes me think of a little bit with students is sometimes they really do see homeworks and things as being punitive rather than, no, I need you to do it this week because this is enhancing your understanding of what we're talking about. And, I wish I could, and I guess, we kind of participate in that because we make it graded, right? So, but it's sort of when they're like, oh, can I just do that homework from 5 weeks ago? And you're like, okay, but it's really not going to do the thing that we wanted it to do.
Oh, that's interesting. So maybe we should be more clear about how intentional we're being about when all the homework assignments are and how they fit together with the labs and the lecture material in these exams, and how it's not just a bunch of stuff that they have to do. It's structured together into this architecture of the class.
Like I did have a situation with a student where they did terrible on a quiz and then they wanted to go, they were like upset that they did terrible on the quiz and then went back later and did this homework and they were like, oh, that would have really helped. Then I was like, I know, that's why I had that homework due the day before that quiz, because it was, so yeah. But then again, everybody's life is in chaos and who knows.
So, but yes, this is the semester of flexibility. So
that is, I like that watchword, because every time crazy things happen now, I'm like, well, I guess it's the semester of flexibility. But there's a professor who we both admire and think is awesome, and she shared that she is starting to do a thing with people asking for extensions of not making them, but saying, oh, sure, you just have to sort of outline why you're asking for the extension and what you're going to do to make up the time, or like to make sure you're staying on top of your work while you're working on this thing. And
come up with a plan.
yeah, I'd love to hear more from her about how that's been going, because but I think she said it definitely seemed to prompt a bit more reflection from
That's
students
great.
about,
That's
oh
great.
yeah, not only am I asking for extra time, but I also need to find time to do that plus my current,
Right.
so
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. And it's so easy to think, I mean, I'm sure we've all fallen into the, oh man, as soon as I get the stuff done this week, it's going to be smooth
I
sailing
know.
because you forget about all the stuff
I
that's going to
know.
appear next week. Yeah. So
I got a
I,
good
I
phrase for that. That someone, it's magical thinking.
uh-huh.
I'm like, it
Mm-hmm.
is magical thinking. And I participate in it all the time where you're like, once this thing's done, then I'm going to be this totally different person who's suddenly doing blah, blah, blah. And yeah.
So I love that intentional reflection of, okay, if you're going to take more time on this, then how is that going to play out? And making sure you have a strategy and helping the students with that. I love it. That's great.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so tell us, you have a quote for us this week.
Oh, I do. I almost forgot. I was going to jump right into the other stuff. So yes, the quote. It's about motivation,
Mm-hmm.
and it's Dwight Eisenhower.
Mm.
Motivation is the art of getting people to do what you want them to do because they want to do it.
Oh man,
I
isn't
love
that the
it.
magic?
I know. And you know what it made me think of is a time that sometimes comes up in lab where I realize I haven't done that is when students say, do you want me to use this glassware or this glassware to measure the volume? And I'm like, I'm trying to get to flip it around. It's you want to use this glassware because you want an accurate measurement, and that
And
is the
you
glassware
know,
that gives an
I
accurate
know.
measurement. So, but obviously at that point, I have not gotten them to want to get a good measurement. They're just trying to check the boxes. So, yeah, I love
I
that,
know.
trying to figure out how to get them to want to do the thing.
That is really, and I wonder, like, it would be so interesting. I have no idea how this would be possible, but to track that, like, is that something that happens as you're a senior, or when does it happen
Oh,
that you
interesting.
start doing things for yourself because you want to have the good measurement and like,
Mm-hmm.
instead of like, are you going to make me do this thing? And like, that kind of,
Yeah. I think it also relates to whether I or whoever's the instructor has conveyed the why, Like,
yeah,
it's not just measure some water and look, you've got all these different measurement devices and which one are you supposed to use? It's like, what are we trying to do here? We're trying to make this solution that we need to be an accurate concentration, so which glassware should I use to get,
I know. And
the
it's like the idea
context.
too, then that it's like an arbitrary choice on your part,
Right.
and you're like, yeah, no, yeah, I don't know. I've
Totally.
definitely had similar things for sure.
So, academic honesty.
Okay, or academic dishonesty. Yeah, I like this is really showcasing our like you're the positive one and I'm like the Grinch, but yes, yes, yes. So, well, can I say a few things before
Yes,
we even
please
get
do.
into? So this is really the first semester I have wrestled with this in the way that I am,
Okay.
and it's been a very intense education that I it has not been part of my landscape that much before. And maybe I've been really, really naive before, but it's been really depressing. And I've heard from people struggling with managing this that it's kind of really making people question things about teaching that like haven't been as big. It's a big one. It's been a big one for me this semester.
So, academic honesty in the context in particular of virtual teaching, it sounds like.
Yeah, and I think maybe I'll get into this in a minute too, but I have come up against this company that rhymes with egg, and I didn't really know what it was before, and suddenly it has become this huge part of my life for a couple of weeks. And so, yeah, it's just sort of really, that has been a really strange thing to sort of come to grips with the idea that like students, whatever about what they might have done normally, but they're like, if it does feel like this company is like literally luring them into behaviors. Do you know
I
what I
see.
mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like a whole other thing to kind of battle with and contend with.
So, just so everyone knows, at this website, you can post questions for
Hmm.
problems, and they have, I forget what they're called, but they have people there who will
Experts.
experts
I'm
who will
doing
answer the
extreme
question.
air quotes about
And then,
experts. Sorry.
yeah, then they'll post the answer to that question pretty fast. So
Hmm.
so the challenge can be, it can happen like during an exam time frame, a question can be posted and answered really fast. Although in my experience, with my class at least, 3 of the 4 answers I looked at were wrong, so it's not always the right answer that gets posted pretty fast.
Right, and that's handy. That's how I found out about, enough people had the wrong answer in a very particular wrong way that it was like, oh, wait, what is this? And that was kind of what led to the
Totally.
whole drama. So, yeah, but I think I would be having a very different discussion about this a few weeks ago when I was still in the trenches with it. But I have definitely re-equilibrated now and
Oh, cool.
recognize most students are academically honest.
Right, right.
Yeah, and most students, I mean, they really are, which is kind of amazing. Anyway, that's something I'll talk about in a bit. But yes, so that's kind of how this has come up for me, or that this is everything I'm talking about now is all brand new to me because I haven't really thought about it. It's not being part of my teaching radar that much until now.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
And it kind of honestly, before we've talked a little bit on here about sort of intentionally trying to not fall into the bitterness trap. And for me, part of that was not going too bananas, assuming people are always trying to cheat.
Right.
Like obviously if people cheat and you find out about it, and I've had to report people in the past, but not kind of crafting things all the time to catch people out and, what I mean?
Yeah, so this semester you've had to think a little bit more about how to craft your assignments so that
Totally.
to minimize cheating than you've had to in the past. Yeah,
Exactly.
that makes sense. Totally.
So tell me, what is working well for you in the world of academic honesty?
Sure. So this semester as well, because of the online exams, I was thinking about this a little bit. And so what I ended up doing this semester and last semester, when we went virtual for half of last semester, I did an honor code thing. I laid out the rules for the exam very explicitly in advance, multiple times, and at the beginning of the exam. These are the things you're allowed, these are the things you're not allowed. I even had the first question on the exam be, I understand these rules.
Oh,
And they just
nice.
had to say yes or no. And then I end with, I trust you. I'm trying to set up this culture of academic honesty. So we're not going to talk about it a ton. These are the rules. They're there. They're very clear. You must acknowledge them. And that's that, you know? Yeah, so I'm trying to set up a culture of academic honesty, and at the same time, as I'm not talking about it very much, but I'm setting up this expectation that I trust them, I'm also trying to not make it too tempting for
Right.
academic dishonesty. So I'm not doing multiple choice questions. I'm not doing questions that they could probably find very easily by Googling. So I'm trying to make it not too tempting and set up this culture where the expectation is, of course, they're going to be honest, rather than, sometimes it can seem like a game. Like, I've got all these are the ways I'm going to make sure you're not cheating, and so then it feels like a game, and I don't want that. I want it to be a nice culture where
I
of
really
course, all
like
trying
that.
to learn together.
And I think that is a big part of the thing of not becoming so bitter. You know what I mean? And also, this is something I'm going to talk about later, but not totally harassing students who never would cheat.
Right.
You know what I mean? And not creating things in such a structured way or restricted way that like it's actually impacting students who wouldn't ever cheat in a negative way. You
Right.
know, and then just the bitterness too of like I have definitely even heard of people making a different version of the test for every student or whatever. And that kind of thing, if I did all that work and then someone cheated, I would absolutely lose my mind. You know what I mean? And I would take it so personally,
Uh-huh.
and so I can, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. So my goal is to be very clear and then just expect that they're going to do it honestly and convey my expectations, but then like I say, not make it too tempting and check. I'm gonna Google my exam questions and see if they appear anywhere, but I'm not going to talk about that too much with them because I want to be
If you
conveying
wrote
that.
that somewhere about me and you were like, I trust you, Ruth, that you're not going to do it, I would die before I would. Like, that would, I almost feel like I'm going red even thinking about it. I'm like, oh no, that would be so terrible if I broke your trust. So
Oh, good.
I
Well,
think
that's promising. Nice to
yeah,
hear.
that's effective. So yeah,
So, what's
yeah.
working for you with academic honesty?
Well, I mean, I think you talked about it a minute ago there, but that you Google it. And so part of the thing that has been helpful for me is that our class code is not the usual class code for physics. Do you know what I mean? Across the country. So if I Google my class name and put that company that rhymes with egg at the end, stuff comes up. So I could find it quite quickly. And so that was helpful. And I think I felt very powerless and a bit despairing about it. But then I found out you can actually submit a form that gets them to take it down. And then you can also submit a letter that requests the name of the student who uploaded it. And so, as
And
much as
anyone
I,
who looked at it.
oh yeah, and so I think, as much as I would like to, I don't like in my parenting. I really try and not be shame and fear based, but I'm kind of going that way with my students apparently. But I think when I told the students that we can access, they looked horrified. So I wonder if I've heard a few things from people that makes me think it's becoming a little bit of a cultural thing among the students, and I could see how it can be very easily like, oh, I just want to check if I got it right,
Mm-hmm.
and it can sort of escalate. So I think it's really good that people were having a little bit more of a dialogue about it and like, oh no, this absolutely is cheating and it will have this huge impact on you if you're caught, that kind of thing
Mm-hmm.
is really important because I think you can convince yourselves of all kinds of things at 2 a.m. when you're alone in your apartment
Sure.
that if you
And
actually aired
in
it
the
wouldn't.
totally. And
Yeah.
it's always when you're desperately trying to get the answer on a question, it's tempting.
Well, that's something else that's really working for me. So I think having that information that I can find that out makes me feel a little bit less. I felt just like really powerless about it. So
Sure.
knowing, okay, this isn't a total lost cause
Mm-hmm.
really helped me. I think something else that really worked for me was doing a sort of a speech to the students and really highlighting, because I think one thing that can also happen for students is they can convince themselves that everybody is doing it,
Right.
and really saying that as someone who grades work, I can totally tell you not everyone is doing this
Mm-hmm.
because people hand in homework half completed, and so I can see how much people struggle with things and don't do this. So please know not everybody is doing this.
Totally.
And then I think a little bit kind of hearing how this could impact your peers
Mm-hmm.
is also kind of important. That, I pointed out to them that, like, if I wrote question 4 on an exam and everybody failed it, I would know I wrote a bad question and I would change the grading scheme
Mm-hmm.
to reflect that. But then if 7 people did it perfectly, that really changes my perception. You know what I mean? So
Totally.
just kind of maybe hopefully asking them to reflect that what they're doing really does impact their classmates.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
Then in my big moralistic speech, I was also talking about really, and I think this is true for a lot of disciplines, but I'm just familiar with the idea of science.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we have to be honest. And
Mm-hmm.
if you're, it's really important. And I was sort of saying, it might feel like I'll just use these kind of manuals until I graduate or something. And then when I'm a real scientist, I won't cheat. But, it is sort of like an important moral issue as a scientist
Mm-hmm.
if you're willing to sort of, submit work that's not your own. So anyway, so all of those things. And then the other thing I think that's working for me is remembering that students who cheat are usually incredibly desperate.
Mm-hmm.
It's usually not an evil mastermind plan. It usually is a 2 a.m. freak out situation. And so when it's possible, and still through all of the official academic channels, give them a way to come back
Mm-hmm.
from it,
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that that's really an important part of it too. I think it is. I used to think that it would be very scary to report people because they would like get escorted from campus immediately and their whole career was going down the toilet. And actually, I've found now from this process of reporting people, it's not quite like that. And usually it's people getting help that they needed
Mm-hmm.
while understanding this is not a good idea. and they shouldn't do this again.
Right.
You know what I mean? But it's
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily a nail in the coffin for them or something. So, yeah, I think giving people a way to come back, and yeah, that is super important.
That makes a lot of sense. Um, I just wanted to throw out there, even though my class doesn't have a specific prefix like yours does, I was able to find all my questions pretty easily by just copy pasting the writing of the question
Oh, the text. Yeah.
into egg.com, and it came up really fast. Even though it was a picture that had been taken and posted, it was really easy to find. So I think if you're looking
Yeah.
for your exam question, I think you can find it pretty easily.
Yeah. And then there's this copyright form that
Mm-hmm.
you can get. But so yeah, I think taking back some of that power and not feeling, but then also having quite open conversations with students. And I think like you said, maybe not getting trapped in a cat and mouse sort of. Do
Mm-hmm.
you remember those old cartoons where there was always like someone trying to catch some animal and they were like unwinding and getting more and more crazy? Like
Uh-huh.
with the Roadrunner and stuff. And I feel like I could see myself becoming like that
Sure.
quickly. And
Sure.
like you said, I think assuming good intent while also not being a fool and like checking and making sure is important.
Totally. That's really interesting. It's
Yeah.
very similar to what I'm working on. Um, and I really like this because it seems like you and I have taken kind of different approaches, but they have the same things in mind, which is cool.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm working on balancing setting up that culture of expecting academic honesty that we've been talking about with making it clear that academic dishonesty will be followed up on. And so where's that balance? Because what I don't want to do is give the false impression that cheating is rampant by talking about it too much. So just like you were saying, so you're
Right.
saying to them directly, I can tell that it's not rampant. Um,
Yeah.
so I'm kind of avoiding talking about it too much because I don't want to give that impression that it's too that it's yeah, because potentially if they think that everybody's cheating, then that would potentially encourage a culture of cheating, and that's the opposite of what I'm trying to do here. So what I'm doing is I'm, like I say, being very explicit about the rules for academic honesty, and then I'm only contacting the odd person who has something suspicious arise on their exam, and uh so I am following up on it, and I'm kind of relying on the rumor mill to pass that around.
Yeah. Dude, you gotta love the rumor mill for sure.
Yeah, that's where I'm at.
Well, I think, but aren't you handling it beautifully? I think, like, when you have that explicit instructions of, like, here's the things that are not allowed, you agree to that by taking this test and
Totally.
cheerfully assuming that you're all going to do the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then you follow up on it. I think that's perfect.
I'm feeling pretty good about it. Yeah, I do wonder. Like, I'd like to kind of send some rumors out about how we can
You
find
need a
them.
plant, you need a
Yeah, I
student who
need to
works for
plant
you
people,
and be like,
but yeah,
yeah,
I think I'm pretty happy with the balance. Even though I'm still thinking about where that balance is.
yeah. And one thing I mean, I think is really important too, like when you're in a class like yours, so much of it is like using raw data, right?
Right. Yeah.
And that does make it ultimately really difficult to cheat. And
Totally.
if they're going to come and perform in the lab, whether
Right.
that's a virtual lab or a in-person lab, like there's just yeah.
Yeah, they each have their own data set and they have to, they can compare with each other. And when they're working on lab reports, I'm totally down for them to, chat with
Yeah.
their friend and then say, oh, that's how you do it. Let me do that with my data. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So, yeah. What are you
Yeah, I
working on?
think,
Oh, go ahead.
dude, I think you're I trust you. That is like the most powerful weapon.
Oh, I'm
Like to
so
me, that's like,
glad.
oh, like that fills me with so much dread. If someone was like, "Don't worry, I trust you," it's like, oh my god, that would be yeah.
I remember when I was a kid and climbing on playgrounds, and I always liked to, climb on playgrounds the way you're not supposed to climb on playgrounds, like up the, I'd climb up the swing thing and get on the bar
Oh
above the
yeah,
swing and stuff. And I would always ask my mom, do you think I can climb this? And she would say, I think if you think you can climb it, you can climb it. And I'd be like, oh. And it kind of put it back on
see,
me. And
yeah,
that was really cool. And I kind of feel like maybe this is something like that, at least, to like put it back on them.
I like it. Yeah, yep, yep. That's some
So,
superpowers right there. Yeah,
yeah.
I think so. The thing I'm working on is, um, none of this is how I want to be. Do you
Okay.
know what I mean?
Okay.
And
Mm-hmm.
so I have, as much as I'm kind of like zen about it, like I have started having my exams on Zoom live, and it's really not what I want to do. I really liked having my exams be the honor code and just sort of, okay, here you go, and you can have 4 hours to do it, hand it in afterwards. And it feels kind of frustrating to me to watch them do it on Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
But really, at this point, kind of with sort of what I've seen of people cheating, I feel like I'm not sure I can do it any other way at this, you know what I mean?
With this particular class, just because of all the history, or in general?
Kind of the history and then the material a little bit too. Like if this was an upper division class, I think it would be harder. But there's such just mountains of stuff out there about this stuff.
I see.
You know what I mean? And so it feels silly, and it feels like for me to be peering at them through Zoom, and it feels like just kind of not who I want to be as an instructor. Like I really want to be, I know you're not going to cheat. And that's kind of been my feeling before. And I think, and some of it was like, yeah, I don't know. Just, yeah. So I think a little bit, and I've actually changed. I was doing it that we had to do quizzes but we have such limited time. I've changed that, and I'm like, fine, do that yourselves.
So
but for the exam,
how do you even know that they're not cheating when you're watching them on Zoom? How does that even help?
No, it helps partly because it's limiting the time. So I think that is an issue. I think I tell them I'm recording it, so you could see if somebody was on the computer a lot. Do you know what I mean? And I'm telling them they can use any paper notes they have. That's totally fine. So they can do that, but they can't.
I see.
Go onto a website and like scan something and take a picture of it and put it up there. And so yeah,
that makes sense.
Yeah. And I think one thing that has happened a little bit with the students is I think they trust me a little more.
Oh, good.
That say we did the exam and then a week later we did it in groups and they got some credit back. So I think they're starting to see like, I don't know, maybe there's not as much need to cheat, like things aren't as desperate or something.
Okay, yeah, they see the structure that you have to the class and how the exams fit in, and that it's all, I don't know, intentional and planned. Is that kind of?
Right. Yeah, kind of. Or like I'm not trying to actually trick anyone or trip people up.
Right,
you know? And
that's
so
always good.
There's a little bit of that. So that is definitely something, and I think part of it is hopefully a situational issue about being online that won't continue. But I also feel like some equity stuff has kind of gone out the window with this, and I think it is stressful for people to do tests maybe in a really short period of time with a giant head looming at them. Like it's not relaxing. And, I wonder how much people could have flourished with that bit of extra time. You know what I mean? And a little bit more flexibility with, I could take this and sort of relax and not be freaking out. And, what I mean?
So you're giving them less time. What if this was a face-to-face class? Would you be giving them more time on the exam?
No, this would be the same amount of time. But when I was originally going to say, you just have the exam basically for like 6 hours.
Because in the virtual setting, you were giving them extra time.
Yes,
but now you're
and
no
just
longer
sort of
doing
like
that. I see.
Right, because I feel like it's a shame, and I'm not totally sure. I don't think I'm going to change my approach for the next 2 tests, but I lament that kind of impact it's having on students who weren't cheating and weren't doing anything.
Right.
That they're kind of getting impacted by this, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm also giving my students the same amount of time on exams as I would have if it was a normal face-to-face class, and as I've probably mentioned previously, that's kind of a tight amount of time, and that's intentional. But of course, there are extra distractions potentially from home that you might not run into elsewhere. Forget exactly where I was going with this, but it was like I am suggesting that what I was going to say is I normally say that the exam is going to take the normal lecture period plus an hour, and you can either start it an hour early or an hour late. So I don't know if you could do something like that where on the exams they have to find a little more time.
Yeah.
Of course, then you'd have to sit there watching them longer, which maybe wouldn't be okay.
And I kept getting so distracted. Where I was like, I'm totally watching you, but then I'd be like, oh, what's going on in my email over here? And I'd be like, no, I'm watching. Like it was, and then also the frantic trying to answer physics questions in Zoom chat was a whole skill level. I don't know if I have it, but it grew anyway during that 2 hour period because I was like, yeah.
Well, this is all groundwork that we can build on for next semester.
It's been a huge learning experience, and I think it definitely, I think I had a little bit of naivety about it, and I think it definitely has made me reflect on that a little bit, and then also kind of too a little bit like where I don't want to go. Because at first I was like, this is it. The game is on. I'm going to catch all you. And like, it's too dark to kind of get fully into that zone. And, you know, yeah. So I think I definitely want to be a little bit savvy. What you're saying is what I would aspire to being. Just like, you guys are fine. It's going to be okay. But I am not a moron. Like, I'm going to go check. But like, yeah.
Totally. And I know how it is, like, when you start off in one trajectory in a class, like, you might just have to keep going that way for this class and then start a different way for the next class. So, yeah.
And having been a student who was, like, pretty uptight, I also do, like, I feel it's very important to protect people who aren't cheating.
Of course.
Against, you know, because I knew of times when there was blatant cheating, and it was so frustrating.
Right. Yeah, you don't want
to sort of
that to be around.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, good thinking, Claire.
Good thinking. Thanks, Ruth.
Yeah. I'll be interested to see where I land for next semester.
Yeah, totally.
With all of this. Yeah. Okay, cool. Thanks. Thanks so much for joining us on the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. We're delighted to have you as a listener, and we would love to hear from you. And if you want to email us, our address is contactprofessorpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear any of your suggestions for future shows or professor quotes that you might want to share with us, or even just things that have come up for you when you were listening to previous episodes. And if you've been enjoying the podcast, we would love if you would spread the word. So the best way to spread word is by telling people you know if you think they should listen to it, or you can leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.